To order, we'll start with the pledge of allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we have a roll call to see who's here.
Commissioner Helmetston?
Present.
Commissioner Kalani?
Here.
Commissioner McNeil?
Here.
Commissioner Soa?
Aye.
4 commissioners are present and Grafton Sterling is absent.
I heard somebody say that maybe you want to change the agenda.
I'd just like to change the order of the agenda if we could. I'd like to take item number
Time
one.
to do that.
I'd move that we move agenda item number 1 down to be after item number 4.
Okay.
I have no objection, Mr. Chairman.
If no other objection, we'll do that. We'll start off with public comment. Anyone in the public who wishes to testify?
On item number 2.
I have a couple of people on here that didn't say whether they wanted to testify or not. Seeing none, we'll go on with action items. Number 2.
I move that we reconsider the vote that we took at the last meeting on the Oregon City right-of-way usage fee.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. Anyone comment? If not, we'll have a roll call vote. Those in favor say aye, those opposed say no.
Commissioner Helmetston?
Aye.
Commissioner Kalani?
Aye.
Commissioner McNeil?
Aye.
And Commissioner Soa?
No.
Motion carries 3-1.
Now that we've reconsidered it, someone have a motion on what we want to do.
I move that we table this until we get more information. In talking to staff, a few other folks, my concerns are that until we know more about how these right-of-way fees are going to impact the water district, I think it wouldn't be necessarily fair to all of the users to charge just the South people now, or just the Oregon City people now, until we know what Clackamas County might do, what City of Milwaukee might do, what the City of Happy Valley might do, because we may end up having to backtrack what we wanted to do before if we don't take care of that. And so we can come back later when we know more information and make a decision on how we want to assess right-of-way fees. There may even be some maneuvering at the state legislature about how these fees are charged to other governments. So I guess that's where I'm at.
You're a little sneaky because the motion to table doesn't allow discussion.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were looking for something.
Well, it wasn't seconded, Mr. Chairman, so. No,
Oh.
it was not seconded, therefore, we can place an actual motion on the floor to take action if we wish, or we can, it's your choice, of course.
It's more hard to hearing, so if somebody doesn't yell
Okay. We can have discussion around the issue, process being at your discretion, we can have discussion around the issue. And then if we can't come to a satisfactory conclusion, then we could move the table. If we do come to a satisfactory conclusion as a result of discussion, then we could place a motion on the floor if that process is acceptable to the chair.
out. Well, I prefer a motion up front, but I'll dispense with that verbally this time. So we'll set the discussion.
Okay. I guess the question and I'm kind of glad you presented some questions, that's helpful. And obviously one of the questions is, are we going to pay the $15,000 to Oregon City without passing that cost on to the ratepayers, since it is something that is being forced on us by Oregon City? Because you're basically saying we eat $15,000 if we do nothing, until such time as we may do something.
I might mention that the first motion that was made last time was to pass it on to all the customers, which means that we pay it out of the general fund.
Well, last week's motion was to only charge it to the south side of the district, which was...
That was the customer, that was the motion that passed.
That's the motion that passed.
The first motion didn't
That's correct.
receive a second.
The three options we had at that time, one was to place it on the entire district, which would be 20 cents per customer every other month. One was to place it on only the south side, which would be 54 cents per customer every other month, only in the south side of the district. And the third option was to place it on the 206 residents of Oregon City, and that was $12 every other month. The thought behind the third one was that if the residents of Oregon City see that their city council has placed this burden on us and consequently on them, they have the power to take political action against, or with, against may not be a fair word, but certainly with their city council, and possibly address this issue. Because essentially what we have here is one government agency charging another government agency a right-of-way fee or a franchise fee, and a rose to me by any other name is still a rose.
Question, sort of probably addressing more to staff than to us here, but are we sure that the 15,000 is the end of the charge? Is that all we're going to have to come up with?
No, the charge is actually greater than that, because we have the direct charge, Mr. President, from Oregon City. We have an indirect charge from South Fork, because they too are being assessed this fee. I talked with the general manager this morning. He confirmed that, but it's an embedded charge in the rate. So there's some monies in there, and I'm not sure until I see the methodology what that exact amount will be or is. And then the other thing that we haven't talked about as an organization, and it's really on the second page, is there is some cost to the organization to administer this fee. And I think what Commissioner McNeil was referencing is that we have also been put on notice by some other jurisdictions that they too are going to be entertaining, I guess, the right or to assess fees as well. And so what I've done is just listed down below what who some of those entities are. We have Oregon City, we have South Fork, we have the unincorporated areas, which could be the county. We have Happy Valley, we have Milwaukee, and we also provide services to some parts of Gladstone. So the real issue is do we take these assessments as they come through one by one, or do we create a methodology now for future increase fees as well? So that's really kind of what.
Carol?
If I could add, we also don't know on these future ones how they might come across. So we could determine a specific way to administer the one for Oregon City, and then the other ones could come in a different way. And if we spent time programming our bill printing software, we may have to do that again as we get additional fees, depending upon how they're charged to us and how the board would determine if they would be passed through. And we have no way of knowing that until we see what kind of ordinances any of these other cities might come up with.
So we don't have any energy from a staff point of view, other than trying to raise the questions for the board in order for, assuming that the board decides to either stay the course or develop some kind of alternative methodology. I think these are things that, at short notice, that the board might want to consider. So,
Now, we have a contract with South Fork.
yes.
How does this issue affect that contract?
In my discussions with South Fork general manager, this would be reflected, his assessment, which is separate from ours, will be an embedded cost in whatever rate he charges us, Westland, and Oregon City, I believe, and it'll be a pass-through cost.
Simple answer is that his rates will go up to include that cost.
Yes. Well, I don't know if they'll go up, because there's a lot of things that are embedded in his rate, but his rates will reflect that cost.
The other thing, isn't there a 3% kicker every year?
Yes.
That's what I thought.
And I think what Ms. Bryke is talking about, we know from talking to Happy Valley that their charge methodology will probably be different than what we've heard Oregon City's charge methodology.
So then we possibly could have half a dozen different charges coming through in different manners, different methods, and we would have to deal with each one of those individually.
Depending upon what they call them.
Not very bright. Not at all.
It's the reason the legislature needs to provide some clarity.
Yeah.
I guess the other thing, one of the things that was important to you, Larry, was that we send a message to Oregon City by assessing the fee to all the Southside customers. I don't know whether you've been to a city council meeting at Oregon City lately, but if you're not a resident, when you state your name and address, they don't have to listen to you. I mean, you have no standing in their council. If they choose to hear one or two, they can do that, but they don't have to listen to anybody. They're there to listen to the citizens of Oregon City. And so I have been to meetings when outside residents have been asked not to speak. So it would I'm afraid we wouldn't be able to help with that part of the thing. I guess the biggest thing for me, though, is until we know what the whole picture here looks like, I think just basically rolling it into the cost of doing business is the best way, or tabling it until maybe after the budget process and figuring out how we want to do this, because it's currently not in our budget.
Okay,
Well,
I think I'll
got one
digress
more.
now for public comment. Is anyone from the public wishing to say something on this issue?
I'll go ahead and step in real quick.
State your name and address for the record.
My name is John Lewis, Public Works Director for Oregon City. I live in Oregon City. Wasn't planning to,
I'm a little hard of hearing you say John Root.
Lewis.
John Lewis. Oh, okay.
John Lewis.
You're on the list.
I'm on the list, but I wasn't planning to speak. But I thought, mention a couple things. One is, just reading your documentation, looks like you've got $15,000 listed as a fee, annual fee, and because you qualify under the minimum, there's actually the city's resolution for setting the fee on here lists several categories, and because we have you listed as having between 10,000 and 20,000 lineal feet of pipeline, and I think the number I see is around 15,000 feet the actual minimum fee should be $10,000, not 15. So I don't know if my numbers are wrong, but I just, and I heard that from our city recorder last week as well. So just keep that in mind. It's not 10,000. I mean, it's not 15,000. It's 10,000, and that would be the minimum annual fee. And I think just a little bit of an explanation maybe about this. This is a model ordinance that the city is following, where we found through really just when the county had their fiber project come in through Oregon City, just kind of kicked this model ordinance on, this right-of-way ordinance. And the city found and came to realization that we really weren't doing due diligence with regard to management of the right-of-way. So all the utilities, in fact, many of the utility providers, we didn't have a good understanding of who was in our right-of-way and how we were managing those right-of-way, those franchisees, or some of them we didn't even have listed as franchisees. So we're finding out now there are several companies in our right-of-way that we didn't know was there, and we weren't probably doing a very good job managing those. So the idea behind this fee is to help the city better manage that right-of-way. And there are those costs associated with utilities in the right-of-way that the city has absorbed over the years. If there's and I think a good example is, often there's pipeline projects that are, we need to do a new pipeline project. We've got other utilities in the right-of-way that we have to avoid. Sometimes we ask them to move, other times we don't. There's costs associated with that. And for CRW, I think, I guess seems to me $10,000 is a fair value. I get the whole question about how to distribute that amongst your customer base. And I don't have an answer for that, but I just wanted to clarify both those items.
Could I ask you a question? When you have a utility in the right-of-way, and there's a failure of some sort from that utility, do you bill them back for their repair? Do they repair it themselves, or do your forces repair it? And if your forces repair it, do you bill them for the cost of that repair?
Well, I would say if there's a failure in the right-of-way, let's say a water line failure, CRW water line failure, we would notify CRW and they would come in and do the repair. We would have costs associated with that, typically inspection, get called out after hours. Typically, we don't. We haven't been doing that, so that's yet another kind of cost that the city doesn't have a mechanism for recouping. So, collectively, all these utilities that are in our right-of-way have an impact beyond what they've been charged for permit fees or franchise fees. And I guess the other piece is just every franchise that comes before the city, there's a negotiation effort that goes into that. And there's legal fees and time in terms of staff. This right-of-way ordinance makes it one standard. So we'll see, we've got existing franchise agreements that are in place and will stay in place until they expire. And at the end of that time, then there'll be the franchisee or the utility will be expected to sign a right-of-way agreement and apply just like you have, apply for a license and then pay a fee, whether it be a minimum fee or a calculated fee based on the methodology. So for us, it feels like this is a way for us to recuperate some of the costs we have with regard to management of the right-of-way. But I get how that's concerning when you look at. I don't believe unincorporated Clackamas County has the authority to charge the fee, from what I've heard, but other cities could, and I think other cities are looking at it.
Just not to argue with you, but my experience, considerable experience in this sort of thing, whenever we had a break in some utility, they paid for the repair, they paid for the inspection done by the owner, and that was it. We didn't carry on with it. I would like to have, if I'd have thought about it, I would have, because it would be a lot more cash in pocket, but that's the way it is. It's just a matter of simple bookkeeping and keeping track of time and materials. But anyway.
The tougher one is when there's an existing utility there and you're, you've got, all the wet utilities and maybe some of the franchise utilities underground. And then, you as a city have to come through and do a pipeline project. And you've got to do special measures to avoid all those pipelines. Sometimes we ask for them to move, but more often than not, we design our project to go around them. And usually at a cost that we don't try to allocate that to the other franchisees or other wet utilities. And, I think that's pretty much an industry standard.
John, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
You're charging this fee to South Fork Water Board, correct?
That's true. We charge our, interestingly enough, we charge South Fork, and also charge all the Oregon City utilities as well. So our water department, sewer, and stormwater, they all pay a fee as well.
South Fork Water Board produces water, correct?
They do.
Do they deliver water?
They deliver water to our reservoir, but they're not like a retail delivery. They get it in a reservoir.
So what kind of emergency breaks would they be paying for if they're not actually delivering water and don't have pipelines running hither and yon through your city, as we do? Why are they being charged? Because if they're being charged, they're going to pass that on to us, and that doesn't strike us because now we're paying twice for something.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure of that. I guess I'd have to look into that and get back to you, and that's something we can work on, whether or not South Fork is planning to charge you in basically a double charge. But they do have pipelines in our right of way. So South Fork produces. First of all, they draw the water out of the river and they produce it up at their plant. So that's where they clean the water and then they distribute that through their pipelines, but through our right of way to our reservoir.
So,
And that's what they're doing.
so Division Street, John, is that, because that's where Westland takes their water, is at the Division Street pump station. So is that the end of the South Fork line, or do you consider South Fork from Division to Mountain View? I don't know how that
It goes,
is.
their pipeline goes from the treatment plant all the way to Mountain View Reservoir.
Who does, okay, through the Division Street pump station,
Yeah.
and then to Westland, yeah, okay.
Right.
And so.
So South Fork will be charged, Westland.
Yeah, okay. I just didn't know how, they divided up their pipe, whether it stopped at Division Street where it splits and goes to Oregon City to West Lynn, or whether it continues on. And then so is the pipe that comes from Division Street and then ultimately across Interstate 205, is that also then South Fork pipe?
I believe at Division and 16th, it's Westland pipe.
It's West Lynn, okay, so that's where that be marked, okay.
Any more questions? Before you leave, could we have our engineer come up?
Sure.
He's a certified smart guy.
Yeah, I know.
That we are dealing with in a roundabout way right now is we pay a fee to Oregon City and we pay a fee to South Fork to higher water rates because they use the right of way. And we rescinded a motion that would have made everybody that used water that went through Oregon City, whether it's a main or a delivery system, we would assess them a fee, a part of that fee. The question I have then is, I realize that we're at the minimum, but the fee is based on the number of feet that we have a pipe in the ground, whether it's a main or a delivery system. Is that right?
Correct. That's the methodology that's going to probably be the minimum. Whether it's 10,000 or 15, I can go double check my numbers tomorrow. So.
Members, that's the reason I supported the original motion, that because the fee is based on our main as well as our delivery system. So people that live outside of Oregon City but get water through our mains are assessed a fee per foot. And if Oregon City decides to change the minimum, the rate will be raised depending on how many feet of pipe we have in the ground, no matter whether it's main or fillers. That's all I have. I'll take one more discussion per person, and then we'll rule that we have to go to a motion.
Just one, one last thing. I would really like to know what the ultimate cost is going to be to us for this right-of-way fees. It sounds like, to me, it's still kind of up in the air. There could be some other fees coming in that we don't know that are still out there. And it seems to me that Oregon City and this statute of theirs is kind of vague when it gets to us. I'd like a little more detail on it. And one more thing is I'd like to ask staff if they could develop a plan to help mitigate this situation, which we were going to be faced with all of these, the other 5 or 6 right-of-way fees, which could ultimately create havoc among our ratepayers. We're having problems there right now trying to be fair with this thing, to bring all these other things into it without these other entities taking care of their own business, but rely on us to provide them with additional funding. It's going to be difficult, and it's not going to be very popular with ratepayers, and we have absolutely no way to mitigate it on our own. The only thing we can do is ask the legislature to help us out on this, and that means going through SDAO, I presume, to help get this thing going.
Someone else.
Good.
If the $10,000 fee is the number that we're talking about, then it reduces the cost every 2 months from 20 cents down to 14, 54 cents down to 40, and $12 down to $8, based on the previous distributions that we talked about. Those are approximate numbers. I just ran them real quick. Defer to Carol on accurate numbers, of course. I'm not heavily invested in which one of those choices that we would make, frankly, but we have to go to the budget process within a month. Our budget officer is going to need to know whether or not we're going to collect money to pay that $10,000 or $15,000 and be able to budget accordingly. And whether that's going to come from income from ratepayers or if we're just going to swallow it, which is still income from ratepayers, but it reduces us someplace else. It seems to me that we could decide how to apply it without having to know exactly what the numbers precisely are at this point. Because we're only talking about a methodology for application, not the actual numbers at this stage. I don't like to decide not to do anything. I think we should decide to do something.
And I think that we don't decide to do something until we know what it is for everybody in the district.
Okay.
I have one more, I think.
Good.
I believe we should get a written agreement from the city that says this is $10,000, because, you know, that drops us down a little bit. I feel that they are obligated to give us that. Yes, Bob?
It's not fair for Oregon City to have to give that number to you. It is our information. If I'm in error, I'll correct it and we'll let you know. Okay? I mean, we have the data, it's our pipes. I know where the right-of-ways are. I thought my calculation was right. I'll just double check it and we'll see. All right.
Well, I thought they knew. I didn't realize they did.
Well, They probably do, but it really is our information, and whatever I get, and when we sat down with Oregon City, we will sit down with Oregon City to prove which way it works, whether it's the gross amount or the lineal foot, that still has to be proven to Oregon City, so they accept the methodology and we pay the bill. At that time, we'll confirm that number. I'll do a little work before that, though, of course.
Thank you.
And let you know.
Okay, let's break out comments unless we have a motion.
The general manager had a comment, Mr. Chairman?
Oh,
Well, I guess, of course, to decide not to decide is to decide to do nothing. And essentially what we would be doing is peanut buttering whatever the existing costs are over the entire rate base, north and south. We do know that whether it's 10,000 or 15,000, we have also have another action by the board that has essentially directed staff to pay that cost under protest. So you would also be reversing that decision as well as part of this discussion. The other issue is, we also know, at least I have with assurance, and I will as soon as I get the worksheet from the general manager of South Fork, because we're entitled to get it in writing by court order, that whatever South Fork's costs are and CRW's share of that cost will be embedded in the rate. We know that. So that's another known, in the whole thing. The third issue is it the board's desire that we absorb the administrative costs? So it's not just the 10 or 15, whichever number that is, or the embedded costs from South Fork, but it's also the cost of administration to the extent that we would have to do reprogramming and those things. Or is that a cost that the board would like for us to absorb? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
well, the president will rule that the motion that we passed last time
Right.
include the costs of Oregon City and our administrative costs. Now, we don't have anything on the table.
So was it administrative costs?
Ken did some wild figures that about what it might cost. I don't know if he included our administrative costs.
I did not.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I thought we included that last time. So, let's have a motion. Anybody brave?
I make a motion to spread the cost over the entire district.
We need a second before we discuss it.
What did you say?
I'll second it,
Okay.
but I'd like a discussion about the motion, maybe possibly an amendment, is that, we didn't include the, everything we had in the first go-around last week. The letter was going to Oregon City as a result of our action, if it's approved. And the embedded costs, we didn't include that in this bare motion, first part of it. So there are two things I think that we should discuss to whether to include or not those two items. And let's see, there's one other thing.
Well, we had a very simple motion. Let me clarify what I think the motion is. To pay the costs from Oregon City under protest and to pass those charges on to everybody in the district plus the administrative costs. Is that?
So will there be administrative costs for reprogramming if we spread it over the entire district?
We still need a mechanism, we'll need some modification to our bill format, because right now we don't have a place for miscellaneous fees, we simply have a place for the cost of water. So I don't know what that would be. I don't anticipate it being too challenging. And then we may need to get our utility billing program company to do a program to spread that, whatever that fee is, across all accounts. I think there's a mechanism within Eden that I can say, here's a new fee, apply it to everybody. And so if we can do that, then there won't be any cost to Eden, but there are potential costs to the bill printing company.
Let me ask a question. The person who made the motion, is that the way I restated it, your motion?
I believe it's correct.
The second of the motion, the way I restated it, is that your second?
Yes.
Okay. We will have a couple of comments if you want to do that.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I will support the motion. While I might have a personal preference of seeing it go to Oregon City residents so that some political comment could be made by the Oregon City residents to their city council, in the spirit of compromise, which I think you have to do, I'll support the motion.
Any more comments? Seeing none, before we vote, I'd like to declare a possible conflict of interest. In my opinion, the last time motion we passed would have raised my water rates, but this motion would not raise the water rates nearly as much as what we passed last time. So the last time I was only one of several hundred people on the south side, or probably 7,000. Now I'm one of, I don't know how many.
12,000.
Anyway,
I think that applies to all of us here at this table, Mr. Chairman.
if you want to declare a conflict of interest, go ahead.
I'll certainly note that it does impact my water bill just as much as it does yours, and just as little as it does yours.
One comment on that, if it wasn't affecting us, we wouldn't be on this commission.
This is true.
That is very true.
Well, under Oregon's ethics laws, if a measure tends to benefit you, you have to declare a possible conflict of interest.
In that spirit, I would so declare them, just to make sure that we're clear by the law.
Same with the other two?
Yeah.
I have no problem with that.
Okay. Well, I now have a roll call vote. Those in favor of the motion say aye. Those opposed say no.
Commissioner Hubbardston?
Aye.
Commissioner Kalani?
Aye.
Commissioner McNeil?
Aye.
And Commissioner Soa?
No.
Motion carries 3-1.
I think what we did covers item number 3 also, doesn't it?
It does.
Okay. So now we'll go on to item number,
Number one. Actually,
number 4.
Oh,
if we have to amend.
So this is just those charges, so it covers that also.
Yes.
So then we're going back to item number 1. Adopt resolution 18-2014. Can we have a motion?
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
I believe that that we do need to vote on item 4 first, because it will include miscellaneous charges plus the change in discharge. Am I correct on that?
Yes, at the last board meeting, I brought to the board an update of the miscellaneous fees and charges. And in that, we simply added a few items that we had gotten from some of our grant donation of assets. We also took off a couple of vans that we had sold. The board had not yet voted on the right-of-way usage fee, so that was not added into our miscellaneous fees and charges booklet. And so what this motion would do to amend that resolution is to add that as a line, right-of-way usage fee, and basically in the book it will state that it will be distributed evenly amongst the affected ratepayers.
Let me see if I understand this now. We raised a whole bunch of fees and charges last time. Now we're raising them again in order to cover this Oregon City fee. Our motion
Just one.
said everybody in the district, it didn't say those out of the district that want to use our equipment.
I think
Is that-
I think
that's your ruling?
I think it's a little bit different, Carol.
So now we have to amend those, okay?
So let me,
Can we have a motion on item number 4?
Wait a second.
Let me place a motion on the floor.
Oh,
Okay. I move to adopt resolution number 15, 2014, amending miscellaneous fees and charges.
second.
Any more comment?
If I understood what we're doing, is that we're simply adding what boils down to 14 cents approximately as a miscellaneous fee and charge to the list of miscellaneous fees and charges. Am I correct? Okay.
Wait a second. We need all the heads over there shaking yes.
The engineer just had a heart attack. Okay, we'll have a roll call vote. Oh, did you have something?
Yeah,
No, he's got something to say.
I was under the impression, and I apologize to Ms. Wright, that there was a question by the board of whether or not this fee was actually part of the rate. And we checked with council on that issue. And there was a concern that when the board voted on the fee, that we had it listed on the agenda as an action item, but there was concern whether or not the public expected the board to vote on it. And council said, as a caution, we should probably put it back on the agenda and vote for it so that it's clear to all persons that in fact the board had voted on it. That was my understanding, so it was a little bit different than what I was hearing.
Let me understand this. Now, if we rent some equipment for $100 an hour, it's $100 plus 14 cents.
No.
No, this is, that's why I said I don't think it was connected to that issue. It had more to do with the board being clear that in fact they were voting on this as a fee and not as part of a rate increase.
What we will do is add a right-of-way usage fee / franchise fee to the fees and charges, and it will be applied as a miscellaneous fee to utility bills. It doesn't affect.
To the utility bill?
Yes, it doesn't affect anybody renting, using our equipment, or any private construction projects where we use our equipment. It will simply go to our utility customers.
And Ken?
Hold, I've got a question. Is this, I want this in the record.
Mm-hmm.
Is this a utility fee or is this a right-of-way fee? Is it franchise or is it utility fee? It can't be both. It's gotta be one or the other.
Okay, I can answer that. We have checked with council as requested, and council has advised us that cities can impose a right-of-way fee.
Yeah, that's
The
fine.
issue that's in dispute before the court is franchise fees.
Okay. So this fee that we just passed is a right-of-way fee.
It's a right-of-way fee.
Okay.
It's a right-of-way usage fee.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I understand it to be. Franchise fee is something completely different.
Kind of.
Well,
Still cost you money.
it does, but I mean, but they're negotiated differently. And the way the city passed this one, from what I've read, this is a right-of-way usage fee. It's not something that is a franchise thing that gives you anything that you would get with a franchise.
I think that what Ms. Bright was trying to clarify, when you see the increase again in the future, it'll be on the listing of fees rather than on rates.
Correct.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
before we call the roll, for the purposes of clarity, on page 4 of the agenda item number 2, where it says City of Oregon City right-of-way usage fee, it says $15,000. Can I suggest that we place the language in there to be determined, since we are not yet clear as to what the amount is?
Absolutely.
So I would amend my motion to reflect that.
Or you can say up to 15.
Well,
Be nicer if it was $5 grand.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, thank you.
We'll have a roll call vote. Those in favor say aye, those opposed say no.
Commissioner Humbertson?
Aye.
Commissioner Kwame?
Aye.
Commissioner Tequino?
Aye.
Commissioner Sola?
No.
Motion carries 3-1.
Okay, we're back to number one now.
We're there.
As I said before, resolution 18-2014. Any further motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I move that the board adopt resolution 18-2014.
Second.
And for clarity, establishing direct water service rates, fees, and other charges is for CRW. Effective date would be April 1st, 2014. Is that correct? That's what it says here.
It should be May 1st.
May 1st is what it is.
Yeah, see, I don't know how you could do that.
Mine says April 1st.
Sorry, I apologize.
That's okay. Got it. Thank you.
Question,
Yes, sir.
is it the same thing to say increase and establish a direct water service rate?
No, I think those would be two separate things. So what did you do?
Well, I would say that you could establish a direct service water rate that was not an increase. That would be a situation where we might modify the way the rate structure is, but it wouldn't necessarily be an increase. In this case, what we have been discussing is an increase to the rates.
Any discussion? Anyone from the public who wishes to testify? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote. All
What are we
those in
voting
favor-
on?
Oh,
There's been a motion and a second, so that we can get into the discussion to adopt new rates and fees. So now we have to have the discussion. I think we were just being hesitant for a moment there, Mr.
oh,
Chairman.
okay.
Yeah, I don't know what we're voting on again, but
Well, we haven't made a choice of the options that are available to us, which is what this discussion
So-
will go around.
I don't believe that these are the only options available to us. Having had a 2.5-hour conversation with staff last week, I have come up with some questions that I really need answers to. First, the amount of money we charge for consumption, the block fees 1 through 4, 5 through 8, 9 through 24, and 25 and up. Can anyone tell me in this room whether the $1.90 per 100 cubic feet of water is covered, the cost of doing that is covered by charging $1.90, or are we subsidizing that rate?
We have passed, or what we have prepared, Mr. President, as a result of the discussion that we had, we put a list of questions up that we were asked to develop. And part of the presentation would be to cover the question that was asked
Okay.
here. And so I was under the impression that you wanted these questions in aid of discussion so that we could get further into the thing. So that's what is up on the screen now and in front of the board. That's part of it.
Well, based on some of the discussions that we had at the previous meeting, I think there was some consensus that our base rate was too low and that we needed to consider increasing the base rate as part of the rate increases that we have been discussing, so that we have a more solid base of guaranteed income, which currently is somewhat lacking. If I phrase that about right.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And we were responding to the statement or request that the board wanted to have a more robust discussion about a lot of these different variables. And so, in addition to these questions, Carol, can you kind of scroll it a little bit and we can come back to them, is
Base rate.
base rate, adequate cover cost of delivery. Does the board expect our rates to fully support the board's capital funding priorities, which is one, and if so, for how long?
Right?
Should our existing and future rates only fund current and existing projects? And then we talked about for capital improvement, is the board expecting to pay for them out of existing money or bonding money? And with the current list of projects that the board would like to see staff focus on, does the board want to fast track the prioritized projects in order to complete them sooner? For example, Carver Bridge out to Beaver Creek. What does it look like if it means that staff would contract out to work, hire more staff, or look at other alternatives? Is the board interested in bonding now when the money is less expensive? It's one of the issues that was asked by the public when they came in last week. You go to the next one. What do our rates look like with increased bonding and over what period of time? What does a unit, I think this is your question here, Commissioner McNeil, what does a unit of water cost? What impact should this have on our rate structure? So those were the questions that I just took the liberties with and put them up there for the purposes of discussion. So that's how that's what these are represented. After that, Ms. Bryke has at least she's run some numbers, so that will directly address the question that we're being asked.
Does the board want to listen to further discussion?
I'd like an answer to my question, is what I'd like. I want to know whether what we charge for our consumption,
In the first block.
or any block, I don't know whether any of these cover the cost to make the water.
Okay, let me address that. What I did, and I gathered some information from Rob at the plant, is I took the units produced at the plant, subtracted from that the units that we sell on a wholesale basis to Sunrise, added to that the units that we purchased from South Fork Water Board, added in the well production that we had last year that we don't have this year. And so that's our net units of water for our customers. I then looked at,
Is there a printed version? I can't read that, I'm sorry.
it should be in your packet.
It's in this? Okay, thank you.
Then I looked at, and I looked at our
Could you
financials.
clarify what a unit of water is?
One unit is 748 gallons.
And how does that relate to the average customer consumption?
Our average customer uses about 8 units a month. So then I looked at our personnel services, materials and services, but I subtracted from that our one-time costs. We had some things, for example, in the fiscal 12-13 year, we had budgeted $100,000 for the rate study. We ended up not spending $100,000, so I deducted the actual cost of the rate study, because that's not something that we do every single year. So I removed the one-time costs and came up with a net operational expenditures and came up with a unit cost of water of $2.25. Now, that being said, that does not include money for capital improvement projects. It does not include debt service. It does not include capital outlay. That's simply operational costs, so staffing and materials and services.
So you kind of lost me.
Okay.
When I look at what it costs to produce 100 gallons of water, I don't want to know what it costs me to, I need to know what the electricity costs, you know, what the maintenance on the treatment plant, all of that stuff. And, cause here's how I think about it. All that other stuff, that's in the base rate. That's stuff that it's gonna take to get the water from there to the tap at the farthest point. And I just wanna know maybe it's the wholesale rate that I wanna know what it costs. Maybe that's the number that I wanna know.
We do have a number of production at the plant
Uh-huh.
that would include personnel services,
Uh-huh.
so salaries and benefits at the
Maintenance.
plant, cost of the plant,
Yeah.
electricity at the
Yeah.
plant, that kind of stuff. That number is, and it depends on what you include or uninclude. If we have all of our water quality services
No, I think that needs to
attributable,
be, yeah, that needs to be in there.
so
Yeah.
it would be about 61 cents,
Okay, so it's 0.61.
yes,
Added in.
No, 61 cents sitting at the plant before it goes anywhere.
yes.
Right, okay. It's great to know. I had no idea what it costs us to produce water at all. And so what is our wholesale rate to like Sunrise?
Our wholesale rate is 6,202, and in fact, I'll be bringing that to the board in a future meeting. It will be increased this year by CPI,
So what was that number again?
62 cents.
62. That's a deal. So, we actually make money at $1.90 for just the consumption. If you believe that the base rate gets it from the plant to the farthest place in our system.
And I would say that with 75 to 80% of our costs being fixed, and less than 25% of our rate structure coming in on the fixed end, that the base rate does not get the water from the plant to the faucet.
I agree with you.
It's the base rate plus at least the first tier, if I'm getting this correct.
Well, so I added in bonded debt and an average amount that we would spend on capital improvement and an average of our capital outlay. And then came up with a cost of $3.01 for the cost of from the river to the faucet.
301, huh?
That was last year's actuals. This year through February, we're coming in about $3.11.
$2 or $3?
Three.
$3. And that's fully loaded.
That's very.
That does not include putting aside anything for future.
No,
snow,
but
just, yeah,
that's fully
it's
loaded
covering our current
before
debt.
we build anything else.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
If that's true, then why do we charge Sunrise 60-some cents instead of the $3?
Because as a wholesale customer, they don't use all of the things that are included in the total personnel services and materials and services. So they do use a portion of the plant, and they use a portion of the system to get to where they take water, but they don't use the whole thing.
They pay for their own distribution costs.
They pay for their own distribution
Yeah,
cost?
we deliver it to a point, and from there, they pay for the distribution within their system.
So the 62 cents reflects what it costs us to produce the water wholesale and get it to that point for them, and we charge them the wholesale price.
Yes.
But it costs everybody else $3.01.
The wholesale cost was based on their, on Sunrise's percentage use, so their percentage of the volume of water that we produce, as well as the administrative cost, which is less because we only issue them a couple of bills and they pay us once. And the movement from our plant to where they take delivery of the water. And we were able, for the rate setter, for FCS group, to isolate what parts of the system they use And even those parts, they only get charged a portion of it because we have customers, other customers along the way.
Thank you. That helps. Does.
Any more questions?
One, quick one. There are several items in here where the bonding has come up. How's our rating now?
The rating has not changed. We did get downgraded to an A minus, I think, from an A. That rating has not changed. I'm actually getting ready to set up a meeting with a bond analyst to speak with her and discuss what steps we might need to take to have Standard & Poor's revisit our bond rating. Some of the things that they look at are the financials that we have, you know, how we're looking financially overall, how we're planning for the future, which would include rates, and also how we're planning for the future, which includes infrastructure. Are we taking care of our system? Are we charging our customers enough to take care of our system?
Well, that last rate study, the consultant we had in, I can't remember the results, and I left that packet at home.
I got it.
What did they say in terms of our future?
When FCS was here, they put out a proposed 8-year plan. Their primary or base recommendation was that we start with a 16% increase in the first year, and then it goes down, and by year 8, we're at a 3% increase. And what that does is it allows the district to meet the financial reserve policies, which include transferring more dollars from our general fund to the capital reserve fund. This budget year, we've transferred $750,000. The plan over time was to add $250,000 to that each budget year until we get up to the proposed amount, which is $1,750,000. We came up with that number because that's close to what our annual depreciation is. So if we're putting aside that much to take care of the system, as things begin to fail when they age, then we will have money available to do some of those maintenance and repairs. Another part of the financial policies was to have a sufficiently robust ending fund balance. We determined that 90 days was sufficient to enable us to cover our costs before revenue started coming in from our ratepayers, and to maintain a $500,000 contingency, which we have been doing.
So, based on that, do you feel good enough to get us a higher rating?
I believe it would. They also, after discussions with the board, provided some alternate scenarios. And one of those was the 9.5% for the first 3 years, and then dropping down, I believe it's 6.1, and then, or 5.7, and then 5.5, and down to 3%. That does the same thing. It takes a little bit longer to get to the reserve place that we were trying to get. But I think from the bond rate people, the fact that we have a longer-term plan in place, I think is as valuable as whether it's the 16% or the 9.5%.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I have another question.
Okay.
Got lots. Can you tell me why we group multifamily residential with our commercial industrial customers?
That was the way that the rate setting was done many years ago. FCS Group did not restructure the rates. The issue that you have with multifamily is that they actually act a little bit more like commercial. Most of their water usage is going to be indoor usage. They don't have as much fluctuation in the summer as do single family. So we charge them on the winter average basis, which means we look at how much they use in the winter months. And in the summer, they can use up to 150% of that before they go to a higher tier.
And so what is the higher tier?
I'll have to look at those, let me look at one of your sheets here.
Isn't that block 2?
That would be block 2 in the multifamily commercial. So most of the time, they're gonna pay for all of their water at the lower tier. And if they exceed that 150%, they'll be in the higher tier. The
But they-
customers that we have that are challenged are small farmers, nursery owners, because they use little or no water in the winter, and then they use a lot of water in the summer.
Right.
They end up paying for most of their water at that higher rate.
At the 291.
Mhm.
I just wonder, I look at residential. I'm sorry, I just think that, you know, they choose not to be a homeowner, they choose not to do all of those things. If they choose to wash their car every day, they're gonna get it at 291, and the guy that's, you know, got a garden and he wants to wash his car is gonna be paying, you know, 320. Because it doesn't take very long in the summer to get to the block 4. And so, as long as you, from my perspective, as long as you leave multifamily in with commercial industrial, you can't, it's just goofy. I don't know, I would really like to fix that. I don't know, I think the multifamily should look just like the residential folks, and, you know, if they don't use very much water, then they'll never get up to the higher thing. But if they do, they get to pay the same as somebody that uses lots of water.
One of the differences on the multifamily is, and it depends obviously on how large of a complex you're talking about, but they do typically have much larger meters, and therefore they're paying a higher meter charge as well.
But that's a one-time fee.
Yes,
Every
It's a
billing
one-time
cycle.
shop.
Every billing cycle.
Yes, right, exactly. And
No.
so do you know,
It's every building cycle.
yeah.
It's not a one-time.
Well, no, but it's one-time fee every billing cycle.
Oh, okay.
And so, how many multifamily dwellings do you think have a 3-inch meter?
I would say a significant portion of them have,
Okay.
have about a 3-inch meter. And, you know, if you're talking a duplex, it could be a 3/4-inch meter or a 1-inch. But,
I mean, I don't
Is that
know.
information that Bob would have?
I don't have the information handy. I
No, no,
don't
I-
quite understand the question.
The question is, so I'm trying to compare, you know, the 2690 that the average 3/4-inch meter user has, that they pay every 2 months, versus somebody that has 50 units and he has either a 3 or 4-inch meter, right? And so there's a disparity there between, you know, what we charge the person at the 3/4-inch size versus somebody that lives in an apartment house that only has a 3 or 4-inch meter.
So Commissioner McNeil, I guess the first question I would have, if you were to put them at the residential basis, would your suggestion be that if it was a 15-unit apartment, you would charge them for 15 residential units?
No, not at all. It's
Okay,
whatever they
I
have,
understand.
whatever they have today. I'm just trying to get a comparison between, that's why I want to know, you know, the large
yeah.
multifamily units. You know, are they 3, 4, 6-inch meters? I don't know what size they are, but, you know, if you take the number of units into the size of the meter charge, and you just do a simple division, and you look at what each unit's paying, it's going to be significantly less than what the 3/4-inch meter guy's charging.
So if you had a differential rate,
Mhm.
to use your example,
Mhm.
I wash my car every day and I take 3 showers a day.
Mhm.
My next door neighbor doesn't. Right now, all of that is fed through a master meter, as you
Right.
know. So one solution, let's say, might be break out residential commercial as a separate entity
Correct.
and figure out another rate structure for them versus
I would just like to compare.
I'm just trying to
Yeah, right.
understand.
Yeah, I would just like to compare, you know, a number of those situations with what our individual customers are paying and find out whether a residential thing, whether you're living in an apartment house or whether you're buying a house with a garden or whatever you've got, are comparable at all, or the people that living, or are we subsidizing the people who live in multifamily housing? I don't know.
Well, I think Carol has some interesting data as a result of this exercise that you might want to talk about that.
Yeah.
So I pulled up this slide, which is also in your packet. I know these numbers are
Is
kind
that
of
10?
small. And I looked at an apartment complex, and this one happens to have a 3-inch meter. And so what they're currently paying in the winter was $2,600. And if you did the unit calculation, so this is times the $3.11.
Hold on, just to clear about what we're talking. So on page 10 that we're at,
That's where you are, yeah.
and you're using a 3-inch meter?
Yes, for
Thank
that
you.
apartment, the top two things, because I did a winter and summer.
Okay.
So if you do the calculation times the number of units that they purchased, the unit calculation, that comes up to $3,300, almost $3,400. So they are not paying to cover all of the debt, capital
Right.
outlay, and all that stuff. In the summer, again, they're about $1,000 under that $3.11 calculation. Now, that being said, you know, these rates, I believe, need to be adjusted, but for that single-family home, it costs almost as much to get the first unit of water to them as it does to get the 10th or the 50th. And the same for the apartment. So, you know, you've got that initial, we have to get pipe in the ground and meters in place, and we have to read the meter and prepare a bill, and there's a lot of that cost that's embedded in the base. And then the additional units after that are technically not as expensive.
So then the other example would be coming down and looking at the commercial. I think that's the other question.
So the piece that's missing here for me, Carol, is the bill that you looked at for this. How many units were in that particular place?
I'm trying to remember how many units were in that one. I know in the large industrial, we were over 9,000 units of water. And in the small commercial, we were at 47. I'm trying to get my
I'm
numbers.
talking a multi-family dwelling.
Yeah.
How many units were in that
Oh,
multi-family?
how many
apartments were in that multi-family dwelling?
We don't have that information, but I will tell you, the one I did was Watkins Park
Okay,
Apartments
sure.
right across the street.
Sure,
So it's kind of a medium-sized
right.
apartment complex.
But do you know how many units are over there?
No, I don't.
There's, 52 units, I guess, just running by the numbers on the doors. And so if you divide that out, they're getting a deal. They're getting a deal compared to the people sitting in the audience that have a 3/4 inch residential meter. That business guy can charge that whatever he wants for that water, and he can use us to make money.
He cannot.
No, he
That's
cannot.
against the law.
Well,
Well, I mean, he can, but he shouldn't.
okay, there you go, because I've rented it, host, and I know how that's done. This is how you put it on the bill, is what you do. You don't break it out as water, but it's calculated into that rent, and you know what you're paying for that. And if he wants to make money on it, he can do it, or she can do it, or whoever's doing it can do it, or a corporation can do it. But I'm trying to figure out a way to give our residential customers, the people that own a home and make this community what this community is, I want them to have as fair a shake as they can get. That's where I'm at. I mean, I've crunched a lot of numbers this weekend. I spent a lot of time looking at this, and every time I looked at something, I went, wait a second. I know why my water rate is the way my water rate is. I do. I know why it is the way it is now. Because we've loaded, I mean, you look at what we're giving the wholesale rate away for, and you look at what the apartment dwellers are going to get, who are just residences, any way you slice them, and then you look what we're charging the individual 3/4 inch water guy, and I'm going, I know why I'm writing a check for $300 in the summer. I know why. Because we're paying the bill. There's the vast majority of people in this water district are the 3/4 inch meters, you know, paying for 4 different rates of water.
We have it's about almost 11,000 of our 12,000 customers are
3/4.
single-family
Yeah,
residential.
Either 3/4 or 1 inch,
Yeah.
probably.
And then our commercial industrial, we've got about 1,000, and our multifamily and our fire service both are like 300 accounts.
And so, to Larry, one of the things that got me going this weekend was the process that we have used to figure out whether we need to raise our rates or not. We really haven't had this discussion, and we really need to take the time. I think we owe it to our ratepayers, the vast majority of people in this water district, to make sure that we can answer the hard questions about what does it really cost to make the water, what does it really cost to pump it out there, and then to give Bob and his engineering group stability in being able to maintain, improve, or correct any of the problems we have, build whatever, they've done a great job, I think, of giving us information about the things that we need to do, but I felt really bad about not being able to give you any kind of funding stability, because you're all over the board, Bob. I've been watching you guys try to figure out A and B and D and C and if this and not that, and it's nuts. And we need to, as a board, I think we need to do a better job of giving them clear direction on what it is this board wants them to do and how we are going to fund that request to them, and to Carol about, geez, look at this stack of paper here. I mean, I kind of feel sorry that we've been running her around the tree so many times. Now we're numbers and colors and lines and circles and squares and all kinds of things. And I started reading this, and I sent an email to Leah, and I can't do it. Like, I don't have enough computer screens to put all this stuff out there so I can compare apples and oranges. I couldn't do it. And so I don't think, for me, until we really know what it costs for all of the things that we need to do, and whether or not we are fairly charging the vast majority of the people who buy water from this water district, that we've equalized that fee, we need to do some more work. I'm sorry, we just do. But I think we have to ask all the right questions, like these ones that you have done here for us. I think that's the right direction to go, and I thank you for doing that. But when I started running the numbers, I'm going, wow, these multifamily folks are getting a steal. I want the same deal as that guy's got. And then maybe I can afford to have a garden, because I'm to the point now where I'm going to go to drip irrigation because I can't afford conventional irrigation. And otherwise, my tomatoes are going to be costing me $2.50 a pop, And so, it's just one of those things. And I've always wanted to know what this was. I mean, for 20 years, I've wanted to know how this breaks out. And it's apparent to me that we've never answered these questions. And so knowing that it's 61 cents down here at the plant, where it all begins.
Those are estimates.
I know,
that's
but
not.
Do you think you're within?
I would say 55 to 61. Rob and I kind of.
That's fine. Take it 60. I'm happy with 61. It could be 65. I don't care. We just need to make sure that we've covered our costs coming out of there, and then we decide. Then I think you have to decide: are the rates for consumption right, or are they too high or too low? I don't know. And then the base rate needs, in my opinion, is from a purely business perspective. The base rate needs to cover the cost of doing business. There is no business around that can rely on fluctuating numbers over here and have any kind of future. They're just going to run into the wall. That's how that's going to happen, and then it's going to be game over. And I don't want to be game over. So we have to look at really what it costs, hard costs to operate the water district. You know, keeping the crews out there fixing the pipes and what you think we need to do for the list of things that we've had on there. Once we have given you a list of the things that we think need to be funded, and then you put a budget together and you put a rate together.
So we started this process quite some time ago, and we did hire FCS Group to do a cost of service analysis. So they looked at our miles of pipe and cost of our hydrants, cost of, you know, all of our stuff that we need for maintenance, and.
Outside the plant.
Yes, well, and the plant.
Yeah,
They looked at the
and
cost of the plant.
separately
And
outside.
the distribution, right, and storage,
Mhm.
and pump stations,
Right.
everything. So they looked at all of that and came up with a rate increase that they recommended. And their recommended rate increase was a 16%. We never got through discussions, we didn't really have a robust discussion
didn't.
with them here to say, okay, now that you've said we need the because when we say 16%, that is 16% revenue enhancement.
Mhm.
So that can be distributed in a multitude of ways. And we never got to the part of, should we have different classes of customers than we already have? Should we have, you know, should multifamily be treated differently than commercial and industrial? Should we add a different class for, like I said, one of the customers that I spoke with was a farmer. So he grows vegetables and sells them at farmers markets. He had questions about what the impact of the rate increase would be to him. Do we have a separate agricultural rate because we are covering a lot of rural Clackamas County? So we never got into those kinds of questions and discussions with the rate setters. And we're trying now to say, of these rate scenarios, what are we gonna do? But so far, what I have done is applied it to the structure that we had in place, that was put in place, 10 years ago?
10 years ago,
Yeah, the tiers and everything else.
So one of the things that I would like as a commissioner to be able to do is if a ratepayer calls me up and says, hey, Dave, you know, can you tell me how what I pay you breaks out? I'd say no. Right now, I could, if any of these people called me up and said, you know, why do you need a 9.5% increase for the next 3 years? And where does that money go? I couldn't tell them, but I want to be able to tell them. I want to be able to say, well, you know, John Doe, it's, you know, it cost me 62 cents to make the water at the plant, and that doesn't get it from here to your house yet. And it cost me, you know, this much money for my overhead, and it cost me this much money, you know, for utilities and chemicals and all the things we have to buy, you know, and electricity and those kind of things. And it cost me so much money to have my capital reserve, and it cost me so much money for reservoirs. And so we all know that things keep going up, and so that's why we have to raise your rate to 9.5%. But I don't know what that is yet. And it would be really nice to have the accountability to be able to do that. I think we owe that to our ratepayers. If we don't know what that is, if nobody in this room knows what that is, I feel like the federal government. I'm sorry, I just paid my taxes. So I'm just kind of scratching my head going, holy cow. I don't know what I got for all this money I just sent to you guys, but I wish I did. But I think that's a responsibility that local government has. I think to the ratepayers and to everybody that we serve, whether it be, you know, the people in Gladstone that we serve, the people in Oregon City that we serve, and the people in Milwaukee we serve, they need to know what it is. And if we decide to raise the rate, it should be simple at that point to say, okay, PGE went up 6% this year, and that means this much money to our budget. And when we get into budget meetings, we should be able to say, okay, Carol says, okay, these are the rate increases we've got for all of the utilities, and this is, you know, these are the number of vehicles we need to replace, and you know, whatever it is, you know, we should be able, it should be that simple. I run a business, I run QuickBooks. I can push a button on my computer anytime I want, and I can tell you exactly what it's costing me any month. every month. And it's not that simple, and
It's not
I
that
know,
simple.
I clearly know that it's not that simple, but it should be a lot better than it is, you know, and I don't know whether we have, I hope we have time to do that. I don't know about the rest of you, but I had some serious heartburn this weekend when I started running these numbers, and I'm going, I'm not against a rate increase, and I think we probably need one. I just don't know what it is, and I don't know why we need to do it. I'd like to be able to answer that question.
And part of our problem, part of the challenge that we're currently facing is that we have not had consistent rate increases over time. So we had a rate increase in 2000, we had a rate increase in 2007, we did the balancing of the rates in 2008, and then we had the 2 years of rate increases in 2013, 2014. So in the last 14 years, we've had 4 rate increases, and we spent down the reserves that we did have. We currently don't have a lot of money coming in from system development charges, which historically has funded a lot of our capital projects. So it's, you know, we've just gotten to a point without managing this consistently and balanced over time that we have dug ourselves into a pretty deep hole.
Right. I mean, so I had 2 issues that I was struggling with. 1, what the rate increase should be, and 2, how many years do we need to do it, and at what rate? I mean, we've got 8 here, right? And even with all the meetings we had with the consultant, they didn't do it for me, I'm sorry. They just didn't get me what I needed to know. You know, they had all kinds of really cool graphs, and I have the whole package, you know, and I looked at this thing over and over and over and over, and to the point where I was blurry-eyed this weekend a couple of times at midnight when I'm trying to figure out what's going on, because I hate going to a meeting and voting on something and not know what I'm voting on. You know, I won't do the Obamacare thing. I won't do that. You know, so I guess it's up to you, Larry. You decide what we want to do with this thing, but I think we have some homework to do, and I think that we owe it to our ratepayers to give them, you know, a top quality water district. And, it's our job. That's what we signed up to do here.
Well, Dave, I understand where you're at, and I'd just like to say a couple things. And number one, we had a group come and tell us about what we need for a rate structure. And in my personal opinion, they didn't know any more about what the costs were and what the rates did than you do right now. And they gave us a whole bunch of figures that they just apparently pulled out of the sky. And so we wasted, in my opinion, we wasted 6 months relying on them.
Okay.
So I guess here's where we're at, in my opinion. We could go through all these questions that staff has asked us, but I don't think it'll get us where we need to be.
Not
I
tonight.
think what we need to do is adjourn this meeting today and schedule a work session right away and have all these questions answered so that we can really figure it out.
Yeah, I agree.
The way I looked at all of these figures and everything, I see no reason why we need a rate increase. And I am prepared to vote that way, but I assume that you are a long ways from that, and you need a lot of questions answered. And I guess what staff is answering those questions for you, maybe they'll change my mind too,
Right.
but I doubt it.
I don't think we've had enough process of the right kind to get, at least me, the answers I need, so that if a ratepayer calls me up and says, why do I pay what I pay? I'd say, I don't know why you pay what you pay. I couldn't tell you the day of that. I know a little bit more now than I did when I walked in the room, and I appreciate that. But, and I know that we kind of have a gun to our head in that we need to cover our costs and things, and we know that we're kind of in trouble, but I don't know how much that is, and I don't know whether the right people are paying the right amount. I firmly believe that we are subsidizing our multifamily dwellings. I absolutely believe that, and I don't think that's right. I think we need to correct that problem, and I don't know what that looks like until I get more information. And I don't know how long it would take staff to do that, you know, lead, I don't know. And I don't need a complete inventory of everything in the district. I just need to get a good sample of, I don't know, a dozen or so average things, and so I mean, if you guys are comfortable with it, I'll be comfortable with it. I just don't know whether we are or not. But when I saw this averaging thing, I'm going, boy, where did that come from? You know, I just don't understand how we can do it that way, at least not for the multifamily. And I feel strongly that whether we create a whole new thing for multifamily that's a little bit different than residential, that's a possibility, I don't know. But I think commercial industrial need to be looked at as a group, and I don't have any trouble with that. And I have no feel, did our consultant talk to us at all about commercial industrial rates?
Yeah, they did.
Did they? I
And
missed
what
that
they
part.
told us is that the commercial customer was subsidizing the residential rate.
Do you know what percentage or?
No, they didn't, we didn't get, they were here to answer the questions.
Right, right.
And they weren't asked, and so, I guess my question of the board would be, what additional information does the board want from staff? And are you asking us to redesign the rate structure? Are you meaning that lessen the burden on the residential user versus the commercial user versus the industrial user? Those are really the policy questions that we
Yeah,
talked
right.
about.
And so, Ken
Or
and
are
I,
we just saying no increase at all, or,
no,
I mean, I guess I'm trying to understand,
Yeah,
if we're gonna go off and do something.
I hear what you're saying. Ken and I have had some conversations about how to apply a rate increase, whether it be on the base rate or on the consumption side. From what I see, it costs us to make the water. And from what I have heard from Bob's crew, I'm leaning towards a base rate increase because, and I don't know, you know, how we spread that over the three kinds of people we provide water to, but I see that as being the fastest way to get stability for you to be able to tell about how much money we have. You know, you can calculate that out by the number of customers, and you get him a number real fast.
So are you also talking about changing the structure? Because you had some comments about that.
Yeah, I don't know, I think that's something we'd have more conversation about in a work session, that's where I'm at. So maybe I can't answer that tonight.
Well, from my point of view, 20-some people that called me about this rate increase. I couldn't answer all their questions
I couldn't either.
because
Sunday I went for a walk, and I started knocking on doors. And in fact, I even got into, I was at Hagen's Sunday afternoon buying groceries, and it was interesting. I bought this gallon jug of Clorox, right? And this gal goes, "What do you do with all that Clorox?" And I said, "Well, I want it in case I ever have to purify water." She goes, "You don't put that in water." I said, "Yeah, that's how we make it clean." I said, that's what kills the bugs. Not very much, but that's how we do it. And then this conversation about water evolves at the check stand. And it was amazing to me how absolutely little most people understand about where the water comes from and how it gets to their house. you know, they don't understand that. And so if we do a better job of educating the people, if we have to raise the rates, we'll have a much more informed ratepayers, and maybe we won't have 50 people sitting out there all upset because we're gonna raise rates, because I don't believe most of the people here the other day had any idea about how the water goes. And that's all I'm looking for, is a very clear and simple way to be able to explain to the ratepayers what it costs, why we need to do what we need to do, and then get it to our budget committee for adoption and out the door. And the sooner we get busy with that, I think the better it's gonna be. And so whenever you wanna have another meeting, I'm there.
Well, it's really hard for me to talk to some person that's on a fixed income, and the rate's gonna go up, and that means food out of their mouths in order to pay their water bill.
Okay,
And they don't have the ability to quit using water.
and so I just ran one, because this is part of Ken and my conversation. So with a 3/4 inch meter, we're currently charging $19.08 for base rate plus the consumption, right? If we applied 9.5% to that 1908, it would raise their monthly charge $3.91. $3.91. If you look at it in percentage, it's pretty good size. But if you put it in real dollars, no.
Yes, the 19.
Yeah, but I took the total and I divided it by 2 to come up with the $3.91. I ran the numbers. The total is close.
Almost $8.
Yes. $5 is about $8. Right, exactly. And so I'm hoping that people aren't that close to the edge, Larry. You know, I really, you know, when they give us that argument about I can't afford $3.91 a month more or I won't eat. I don't know whether I'd buy that or not. Especially if they're smoking cigarettes and if they're got a cell phone bill that they're spending $250 a month on, and they have cable TV and they have all these things. My wife said something that was kind of interesting. She said, well, you know, there's only 3 things you need in life: food, water, and shelter. The rest of it doesn't matter. You know, if you can get food, water, and shelter, you're in. And after that, everything else is gravy. And so, you know, I'm okay with that rate, but I don't know whether it's the right rate. I don't know what it is. And until we have that meeting and have that conversation, I think we need to hold on.
Here.
A couple of things. Dave's referred to the apartment,
Multifamily.
yeah. Now, it seems to me to get to the point that you're looking for, you need a meter on each one of those places. Otherwise, you're going to have to accept statistical analysis.
Right.
Okay, and that's what's happened.
Right.
So it's either one or the other, or maybe some kind of a combination, I don't know what. But I can't imagine sticking a meter on each one of those units
I
throughout
can't
the
either.
county. So you're going to have to use the statistics.
You'll have to extrapolate.
Right.
Right.
Okay, and that's basically what's been happening, I think, over then the other thing is that we're looking at what we need and what we have. One of the ways to do that, kind of a quick and dirty, is look what the revenues are, what we have in pocket, and then what it is that we need to do, what sorts of projects, and how much that's going to cost us, and when do they have to be done.
Right.
Okay, there's that. That's one case. I'll grant you that maybe the residentials, and I'm one of those, is paying, supporting the rest of the group, although I think that we found, or we know that the industrial is really carrying the load. They're getting, you know, they're basically being hit stronger percentage-wise than we are, the rest of us, and which is a good thing. We need more of those, right?
It's the way it is in the fire service too.
Yeah.
The industrial base here is.
All I'm saying is that's a point. Now, addressing the fact that there are some people that may be short of bread money because of our rates. When I first got on this board, and I learned that I was gonna get, I didn't know I got anything, but we were gonna get $50 per meeting. I proposed to set up a 501c3 for those folks who are really hard up for money, for you know, groceries or whatever. Couldn't get any interest in it. Could not get anybody interested in it. Now, the employees have a fund that they contribute to, where it's not a 501c3, they just contribute some money to help people who are having problems with their water bill. I don't think it's a very big bill, or a big fund, but at least there's an attempt there. If anybody's willing to participate and set up a program like that, I'm sure there. But I sure couldn't get one going. I couldn't get anybody interested in it.
So it'd be kind of like what gas and electric do with the donations they collect for?
Theirs, they call it a tax.
No, it's.
You contribute in your bill, you look
Right.
at it, it's a tax.
Is it a tax?
I called about
Did
it,
you?
and
Okay.
it's not, you can't deduct it.
Right.
You just pay it. And that's to help people who are having
Okay.
trouble
Okay.
paying their bill.
Right.
This isn't, I'm not asking anybody else to contribute. They can if they want, and it would be tax deductible. But it's a 501c3, which would take $2 or $3 grand to set up. You have to develop a board and so forth and so on. And I've been at
And then-
that for over a
And then,
year.
and then we would be, in that, it would still be tax deductible for
Right.
them, but we would be similar to what the power and gas people do. People could donate a little extra money on their bill to help other people out.
Sure. If, you know, voluntarily.
Yeah, well, yeah, right.
But, you know, hit a hard wall there. Nobody wants to get involved.
Well, it's real hard for me to explain when somebody calls me up and they say, well, you just went into a contract with this, for one night, with Sunrise, which you're giving them, selling them water for, what, 60 cents, 60-some cents, and you're charging me for the same water, $30, $40. How could we explain where all that overhead is? You can't explain it.
Well, I think that
You
it was
can't
addressed
explain why
earlier.
people would give overhead that much money.
It was addressed earlier by Carol when she described what the difference between at the plant and the transmission and the upkeep of the lines. There's quite a bit of difference. There's a lot of expense in there that isn't included in that initial
Yeah,
60 cents.
you know what it costs to make the water. Right?
Sure.
Yeah.
You've got to get it from here to there. And then in the meantime, you have to replace old, worn-out infrastructure. And it just goes on and on. It isn't a freebie.
There's $2, according to your thing here, there's $2 difference between the Sunrise rate and our rate. I mean, exactly, 25 and 27. And I don't know whether the wholesale rate makes up much of that or not, I have no idea.
They purchase from us and from the North Clackamas County Water
Do
Commission,
they?
so they've got some blended costs, and then they again have distribution costs.
Yeah.
And their costs are probably not as high as ours, because on the south side, we've got much more distance between meters. So we do have some additional costs because of that, lots more mile of pipe going to fewer customers. That increases our overall cost. I would be happy to meet on a work session. I do not know what I need to prepare
Right,
for
right.
such a.
We will, before we meet, we'll make sure you know what that is. I think we owe that to you.
Well, I think we're spinning our wheels here. Maybe we could answer a basic question. And that is, we're talking about building a line for emergency transmission across the Carver Bridge and out to the hinterland there. What is the board's position on whether we add that to the rate or whether we bond that, sell bonds now that the bond rate's low?
Speaking for myself, I say you do bonding.
I agree. I think all those large capital things you have to spread over a longer period of time.
Yeah, we couldn't afford to do it on our own.
No.
And I do have a comment on that. In a case like that, significant bonded debt, it's not a choice of bonded debt or rates, because you have to have sufficient rate revenue to cover the revenue bonds, and you must meet the debt covenants. So right now, we could not borrow to do any of the construction for the Carver Bridge projects or any of those looping or connecting projects without also raising the rates.
Mr. Chairman, that segues right into the comments I'd like to make, if I may.
Well, Dan, to you, for Ken talks, it looks like this board, without my vote, is going to raise the rate. So we don't have any problem raising the rate if we sell bonds to do some custom construction. No, Ken.
Thank you. With all due respect to your focus on details, and I understand your need to get those details, my experience with the people in my neighborhood that I've talked with is that I've never had a person ask me once what the cost of a gallon of water or a unit of water is. They did want to know why are we considering the rates going up, and the explanation of the cost of our operations, the cost of replacing old infrastructure that has to be replaced, the expansion of our infrastructure for the Carver Bridge project and the intertie to Portland, and other projects that will be coming down the pike, because we are going to be looking at probably another $50 million or more of earthquake requirements that we're going to end up having to do over time in the district. I look at, as a board member, the big picture. That's just one aspect of it. I look here at the revenues that we currently have and where we go if we do nothing. And if we do nothing, we go under. In 2010, we had $12 million in the bank. If we pick one of the rate scenarios, doesn't make any difference which one we pick. I have my choice, but it doesn't make any difference which one we pick. In 2022, we will have $12 million in reserves. We will meet our board policy and reserves. We will meet our bonding reserves, which we will have to have if we're going to bond for the infrastructure. We will meet our capital improvement reserves. We will meet our rate stabilization fund reserves, and be able to continue to do the year by year replacements that we have to do, which usually come in at between $1 million and $2 million a year every year. That basically comes right out of the rates. If we don't do something, we start going backwards, and it takes us longer and more dramatic rate increases to get back out of the hole. We are in this hole because the prior board made a decision to not raise rates and spend all the money. I'm not arguing that they spent it in the wrong place. I think they put it into infrastructure, which is pretty much where it was supposed to go. But if you keep emptying the bucket and you never refill the bucket, sooner or later, somebody's got to do that. And we are that somebody. I have no problem with the idea of re-looking at the multifamily issue as a separate issue. We could do it this summer as part of a work session, and we can restructure that if that pleases all the members of the board. And we come to the conclusion that it's an unfair structure in some way. That's not a problem. But we are in a position right now that if we don't make a decision, and fairly quickly, we start falling behind. We've had 7 meetings. I believe this is either the 7th or the 8th. If we make a decision now, it is applicable starting in May 1st, and the numbers that Carol has prepared for us moving forward as to where we will go on the budget will hold. If we delay it with another work session and it takes us anywhere from 2 weeks to a month. We're in July 1 before the rate increase could be applied, and that's going to be 2 months of 2 months worth of the $714,000 that we don't get this year, which means we're behind. We already start behind the 8 ball. If we don't make a decision tonight, I think we need to make one by the end of the week. If we want to have another meeting and just get some more detail between now and the end of the week and have a meeting Thursday, and so we can make a decision, I think that's the responsible thing to do. The bonding reserves, they're imposed upon us. The policy reserves are the policies that we decided in terms of where we wanted to go. The projects that we want to do are the projects we decided we want to do. And the only way we can do them is if we do the rate increases. That's the only way we're going to be able to pay for them. Those rate increases will support the bonding that we'll need to do, and without them, we're not going to get the money. It's that simple.
Okay.
That's where I'm at.
So you tell me what that list of projects is, not connection. I know where we are with the connection with.
Those were the 2 projects that we prioritized.
Right, but, so what, and maybe you could help me here.
There's a lot more, by the way. He'll tell you more projects.
No,
He's got a line.
that isn't it.
Oh, okay.
If we vote on this, I can't find the sheet, the one that does the 995,
Yeah,
whatever.
that's
yeah.
rate increase C, and then the options are another issue.
So, how many projects, I mean, we had so many projects, you know, you broke it up into so many pieces out on the south side, and you and I talked about it at the meeting, because I wasn't clear about what this got us.
Yeah.
Do you know what it got us? How far does that pipe go? Does it go to Beaver Creek? No, it doesn't go to Henrici. It goes short someplace, and I don't know where it stops, but yeah, I don't know.
I defer to his.
Yeah.
He's the engineer. I defer to his.
Right,
judgment
sure.
on that.
It'll go just like the pipe that runs through here to Portland. There's a gap in it. We'll have gaps in it.
Right, and so we'll never,
Unless we complete it.
yeah, but,
I mean, if our objective is to complete that so that we have that tied with Sunrise Water Authority, real water, and be able to close that complete loop, then obviously we have to close the loop. So that's all part of. I know that was a project that was near and dear to the chair's heart.
go back to you. Did you ever tie that list of projects on the south side to what this rate increase scenario is going to give you?
Okay. What I've done for the next 5 years in my planning and my thinking was we have certain projects that are mandated. And I realize you have asked to do these other priority projects, but I want to bring back to you again, those priorities are those mandated ones that we don't have a choice.
Right.
So the JTAs, you know, and some of this Bell Drive and stuff, which are expensive projects, are mandated. So I've included those in.
Okay.
What I've done for the next couple of years, or this next year, I also ask about surveying and pre-design. So, 2 of the big projects that we have on that list was the Hatton and the Butterfield project.
Okay.
So this next year, what I'd like to do is survey it and design it. So come next spring, we're ready to go into construction,
Yeah, bond, how,
bond,
whatever.
of course,
yeah.
somehow depend on the rates, situation, money-wise. So we could probably in the next 3 years have a good portion built from Carver Bridge to Redland Reservoir down through Butterfield Lane to Redland Road.
Yeah, right, okay.
So the whole.
That's what I thought,
So
it
the whole
basically
Redland-
stopped at Redland, right?
Yeah,
right.
the whole Redland pressure zone. Here again, it depended on how much water is available Sunrise Water Authority. We will have to work closely with them and see what they can move through their system. Because remember, we're connected to Sunrise Water there. As we bring money in, that's where we're going to balance how much reserves, how much we can bond, because those rates will dictate how much we can bond for. So as we're doing the preliminary designs and construction of these first 2 projects, my intent is to work with the board, staff, where do we go from there? Do we go on down south, try to get through, I'm gonna say Grassel, but I can't remember the route, Grassel Road down to Forsyth. I've looked at several options, so it's a little vague in my head. But to move on to the next phase, like I said before, I believe we spoke, it would take a multitude of years and money to get $36 million built. Now, remember also, two of the large dollar amounts was the 152nd Avenue Reservoir, probably $10 million. Shared or not, still a lot of money. And then we have another reservoir, Beer Creek, that's planned in the future that hopefully Oregon City is interested in sharing costs there. That's to be determined, or we do it alone. That's plus 5 years at least. But we can get a good third to, I'll say a third of the project done in the next 4 or 5 years. That's a big chunk of that big plan.
And Nolan, and you're saying that with this scenario that? Yes. That's
What are those scenarios?
Okay.
That was the reason for at least the 8-year horizon.
Okay.
It was beginning to look
That's what I'm trying to
out.
understand, is
Yeah.
that.
Because they had, the body people are gonna look at a long-term plan. The other thing, in terms of the choice that I personally have landed on, I wanted to do it in a way that, because I respect what Dr. Soa has to say with respect to people that are on fixed incomes, because I'm on a fixed income too. And I know Hugh is, and I suspect you are too. So that's not foreign to any of us. But our responsibility is to the district as a whole. So I looked at the numbers and said, okay, what way can we do this that allows people that are in low income the most amount of time to adjust to the increases, while at the same time meeting the objectives that we have. And that, requires some compromise. So that's why I settled personally on the 9.5%. It would be the least painful and most gradual rise. It meets all of our objectives. And then what I call, what I think you labeled as option 2, I believe would meet the objection, or the objective that you had, which was to take 50% of that 9.5%, which would be $300 and something thousand. Yeah, and put that on the base rate for the first 3 years. So that we would increase that base rate by essentially half of the money we're going to raise, 3 straight times. We can take another look at that once we get past those first 3 rate increases. But that should significantly improve if you will, guaranteed income quotient that you were talking about for the engineers and others to do their planning. So that's why I settled on that. Now, again, it's all compromise, but that was my rationale and my thinking on that.
Okay, so going with what he said, so if you put 50% of the 9.5 on the base and 50% on consumption,
Which turns out, I think it's 21%, was it, on the base rate, and 5.8% on the tiers, I think is how that worked.
To clarify, the 9.5% was calculated against our retail rate revenue to come up with a number, and that number is about $714,000. Now, obviously, there could be changes in behavior. We could have a very wet summer, we could have a very dry summer, but we would anticipate increasing our retail rate revenue, that's wholesale, or that's commercial, industrial, residential, by $714,000. And so what I did is I looked at the base rate and the tiers, and I increased both of them, but I weighted the increase to the base rate. So it was like a 21% increase to the base rate and about just under 6% on the tiers. And that's the blue papers that are in the packet, in the board packet.
My notes, 21% on the base, 5.8% goes on the tiers.
so this sheet that we got quite a while ago, when we put that up there, where did the 9.5% come from?
The 9.5% was an alternate
I requested a scenario that was
Scenario.
under double digits.
Okay.
That's where that came from.
Which also lengthened the horizon.
So it moves
The-
it out.
Right. The other thing that we heard, just to complete the conversation, when we talked to Standard & Poor's, which is the rating agency for bonding,
Right.
one of the things, well, the primary thing that they commented on, when we look at your capital projects over the period of time that it would take to do it, we don't see a plan for revenue recovery that would sustain the projects that you have. And so that was their reason for dropping us the 1/4 percentage point. What we have since done this year, just about a month ago, I guess, is engage, as Carol talked about, Schwabe to kind of come in and sit shoulder to shoulder with us so that we can go back to improve our bonding rating by the 1/4 percentage point, if that was going to be the board's direction in terms of paying for future projects. So we really had both of those things going on. And so it was really more of a preparatory move than it was anything else.
Yeah, and preached right to grease those skids ahead of.
Let me ask the question, try to get this bogged down. How many days working with staff will it take you to answer the questions that you had? And
I like Ken's idea.
just
I
to
mean,
preface that is, everybody do this sheet right here, and that sheet was prepared by a couple of computer geeks that were sitting at that
No.
table that I believe didn't know anything about this, the way this water district ran.
Carol, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, if I may, was this graph prepared by you, or was this prepared by them?
I prepared that graph based on the capital projects that
That's what I
Mr.
thought.
George had presented to the board. It was
Okay.
that 8-year plan. The calculations are based on the rate recommendations by FCS Group.
So it's a combination.
So
Which are based on the numbers you gave.
to shorten the number of things that we have to do before we can solve this, I'm perfectly happy with picking up the questions about multifamily and stuff at some later date.
Okay.
I don't have any trouble with that at all. I think that's a conversation that needs more study than anything right now. As long as we're serious about going back and looking at that and making sure that we have made that as fair as we can. I guess I have one last question. So let's call it $715,000, okay? That's the amount of money you think we need additionally every year for the next 8 years, or does it grow every year a little bit more?
No, it actually gets smaller, and I did provide that in the presentation at the rate hearing. So if we do, the recommend is 9.5%. In year one, it's 714, we'll round up 715. In year two, that would generate 780,000.
Okay.
In year three, 850,000.
Okay.
And then year four, we cut back
Right,
to
exactly.
a lower rate, so then it's 565,000. And so if you, slide 4, I think, of the rate hearing presentation, shows the dollar amounts that would be generated by the 9.5, 9.5, 9.5, and then where we go from there.
Hugh, where are you with that? Do you buy that number?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I said, I have to rely on you guys too to know whether you think that's a reasonable number or not.
Well, we've had, as I've said, 7 meetings, and I've been looking at these numbers every way that I know how to look at them, and I've gone over them with Carol on a number of occasions to make sure I understand them. We listened to Bob George and the list of projects that he has. clearly what we are considering won't meet the long-term needs, because with all the projects that he has backed up over and above what we specifically asked for and the routine things that happen every single year, we have this whole earthquake, what is it, resiliency? Seismic thing coming down the pike from the state. It is going to cost us a great deal of money. So
Well,
I think this is the first step in the direction that we have to go. So yes, I think it works.
You know, the state and the federal government do a pretty good job mandating stuff, but they never send a check.
They
You
never
know,
do.
so, you know, as far as I'm concerned,
That
I
is
don't
so
put a
true.
lot of credence in that, you know, I just guess I don't buy that for a second.
Well,
You
it hasn't
know,
hit us yet.
Well, and here's the deal, it's the same thing with the schools, and it's the same thing with fire stations, and the same thing with police stations, and city hall buildings, and there's no check, and.
There never is.
And so, it's whatever those folks decide we're gonna do is what we're gonna do, and I think the short term, for me, is 5 years. We need to fix it for that period of time, for sure, and at least get us on a better footing than where we are today, you know?
I do just want to add the 715,000, at least 500,000 of that is immediately used, 250,000 to increase our transfer to the reserve fund, the capital reserve fund. And additionally, in the last 4 or 5 years, the SDC, the System Development Charges Reserve Fund, has been paying a portion of the outstanding debt. And that fund is getting low enough now that we need to pay the outstanding debt straight out of the general fund. So that's about another $250,000 or $270,000 increase of cost in the general fund. So the reason it's 9.5% over 3 years is because we're biting little bits of the apple as we go, but it will enable us to increase the transfers to the capital reserves, and it will enable us to continue paying our bonded debt service as scheduled.
Pretty much have to do that.
I have a question. Are we prepared to vote and make a decision tonight, or do you want to have another couple of days and then another meeting on Thursday?
No, I don't want to prolong this any longer than we have to. However, I need some assurances that we are going to take a really hard look about how this whole rate thing goes. And I'm pretty adamant about not changing our consumption. So whatever we need to add to our base rate, I mean, if,
Can I modify my motion?
you can. I mean, I'm thinking about the people who are fixed income. When you start adding to that consumption thing, they don't know how much water they're using sometimes until the bill comes, and then it's, oh, damn, you know, I'm in trouble, I can't pay that bill, and they're not coming down here and they're begging to Carol, can you give me another couple months to pay this, you know, and do that. Whereas if they know for a fact, for me, if I'm on a fixed income and I know that my base rate is this much here, and if I shut off my water, I only take showers and wash my dishes and drink a little bit of coffee, I'm only gonna use, you know, I'm gonna be in that lower tier thing every time, and I can do a budget. But if my consumption thing keeps changing all the time, I don't have any idea what I'm doing.
What we could do is something that they do in Lake Oswego.
Okay?
What they do there is, if people qualify and they have to show their tax returns and quite a bit of documentation, then they get a special low rate for people that are very low income. And there's a whole qualification process. I don't know exactly all the details of that, but that is something that the board could consider in the future for those people that we have that are really low income. So if we have some people that we really get hit in the way that Dr. Stowe was talking about, then we could, as a board, develop a policy that allows staff to do an evaluation of that nature for people that really need the help. In terms of process, like every other board member, if getting more data, working on the multifamily issue is something we want to do, I'll, as secretary, put it on the work
Yeah.
work,
And we can do-
work session agenda, so it will come up at a work session.
Yeah, right,
Guaranteed.
and that's fine, you know.
So that's.
And so I have one question, so what do we have to get the 715,000, what does the base rate have to do that?
The handouts that we provided are color coded
Okay.
to make this a little bit easier. So attachment
Let's go to the
one,
color, which color am I looking for?
goldenrod.
Thank you.
The goldenrod attachment puts all of the rate increase to the base charge and does not change the tiers.
Okay, that's what I understood,
Okay.
okay?
If you go to blue,
And hold on, just so I'm clear,
okay,
we're gonna get to a decision. That will get us the $715,000?
Yes.
Okay, thank
yes,
you.
all of them will.
Okay, all of them
Each
will.
of them do the same
Just
thing,
split it up different.
just a
Okay.
little bit in.
You just
in
slice and dice
different
the
ways.
baby different.
I also
Oh,
heard,
that was an image.
Yeah, I know,
I also heard
kind of where I
that
am.
we have an 8-year plan, but as a board, choose however many of these you want for, so if you don't want to do all 8 years, if you don't want to vote on all 8 years, just say, you know, the first 5 or whatever. Blue, just to be clear, takes that revenue that we anticipated and puts half of that revenue to base and the other half to the tiers.
Mhm.
So it raises the tiers a little bit. You can see in the first year, instead of $1.90,
Mhm.
it goes to $2.01. And then the attachment 3 in kind of the lime green color, that adds 9.5% to the base and 9.5% to each of the tiers.
So it just spreads the whole line and set 0.5% all the way across.
Right. And so all 3 of these do the same thing. The first one gives us 715,000 pretty assured because we know how many customers we have.
Right, exactly.
The second one gives us about 58,000 pretty much assured. And the third one only gives us about 120,000 assured, and the rest is subject to,
Whatever the
Behaviors.
women,
and the weather.
yeah.
Damn right. Well, I'm prepared to modify my motion.
Okay, so I keep having a question.
Okay.
Because we're almost there, and so the duration, what I am afraid of by voting for so many years out, what do we do to future boards who may be in this position again at,
They can revisit it at any time.
they can't?
Yes.
Okay, I don't want to hamstring anybody else in this spot, you know, and so.
They can always blame us.
That'd be fine with me.
Yeah. They'll come out scot-free.
Yeah, I'm good with that,
That's all, isn't that how it's supposed to work?
yeah. And I hope they
You always
do.
blame the last
Yeah.
administration for
I hope they
everything.
do that, yeah. I won't leave my phone number.
Are you ready now?
Well,
I mean,
I guess I'd like to hear where Hugh is and where Larry is finally after we beat this thing to death.
I
What's
think
your
I
question?
lost my place at 13 minutes ago.
Well, and I wanted to drink water for the last half hour,
well,
being that we've been talking about water.
I think I can cut to the chase and get us to a point where we can take a vote if it pleases the chair and everyone else.
No, I guess I'd like to hear.
What's the,
Anything to please me if we can move forward.
I'm ready.
well, let's put it on the table, what we're gonna vote, with the
Yeah,
proposals that we're
right,
gonna vote
exactly.
That's what I was prepared to do as a since we have a motion on the floor,
for. Okay.
this would be a modification to the motion. And that would be that we would accept rate schedule C, which is the 9.5% one. The one that starts with 9.5% for 3 years. I believe on
Okay.
the rate document it's C.
Everything that's.
Oh, hold on.
is
This gets really
9.5%.
confusing.
So,
So are we talking attachment 3 or C or, yeah, come on.
This level increase,
Yeah.
option C of the 5 rate scenarios.
Okay, see,
So
okay.
that's the 9.5%.
and
I've got to be on the right page.
this
What page you're
resolution,
on?
this resolution does not address that. This
Right.
resolution is
That's why
totally for the 9.5%.
I don't know where that C, is this C? Is this,
Keep going, keep going.
keep going.
Are you,
Let me make a
Okay.
motion.
let me get it all. Okay, so it would be option C, which is starts with 9.5% and goes through to 3 of those 2 in the 5 or 6% range, and then to the 3% range. Okay. Under the options that you gave us regarding the base rate, I would suggest option 2, which is where we would take 50% of the 9.5% and put it on the base rate. And I would recommend we do that for all 3 years of the 9.5%, which would meet the objective that I believe you have of a more guaranteed solid income for the district, while making the increase relatively mild. And we adopt it as, at this point in time, as a full 8 years. So that if we're going to go out for bonding, we have a plan in place that the bonding people can look at. And I remind us all that we can always revisit it if something needs to be changed.
You're gonna hate me. So what I heard from you was that all 3 of these, provided behavior doesn't get too weird, gets us to the same spot. So if we took the 9.5 and we put it on the base rate for the first 3 years, and then did the rest the way you talk about for the other 5 years,
That gets you, I mean, you're hitting the low income people particularly very hard, very fast, rather than giving them a chance through maybe cost of living adjustments on Social Security or whatever to kind of be able to keep up.
I understand that.
That's
But
why
but I'm looking at the water district much larger than that, and I see how much need we have. I see that as being able to make up what the past board did to us. And so, one of the ways you think about the people who, I mean, we've been giving them a heck of a deal for the last 3 years, maybe it's time to pay the piper. I'm sorry, I understand what that does, and I'd be willing to do that, but I want all the money, I want it in the bank, and I want to make sure that this group over here has what they need to do, at least for 3 years, guaranteed, to get some of these projects out the door and in the road. It matters to me that we fix some of these problems. I mean, I've heard the frustration from our engineering staff about the grinding the toe in the sand, and you know, if we don't do it, the people of low income may not have the water. It may not matter. We've got to cover what it takes to at least get us going for the short term, and then I see it as a compromise between those two. So for 5 years, we'll split it between the base rate and the, no, 3 years we'll put it on the base rate. After that, we'll split it.
Oh, okay.
For 5 years, we'll split it for rates of consumption. If indeed all these get us to the same spot. You, what do you think?
You're saying for the first 3 years,
We do
9.5%, all of it goes on the base.
Right, and then after that, we split it equally between the base and the consumption.
So then it goes to 50-50.
Yeah.
That's not the motion in the second, so we have to wait to make her the motion and see if he agrees.
Wait to see what Hugh's chewing on.
Basically, I like the idea of getting there faster, but my problem is it was mentioned earlier that we're hitting that lower income bracket harder.
Mm-hmm.
Do we want to do that?
I don't want to, but I see that we have a certain amount of need right now that we haven't taken care of for a long time.
Well, yeah, I agree with you.
That's where I'm at. I just think that we need the money now, and it's irresponsible to keep delaying this stuff any longer. And then, you know, we've been, what, 5 years, you know, not taking care of business, and we gotta pay the piper sometime. You can't keep deferring it. If you do, we're gonna have a crisis on our hands.
How about all of it on the first year, 50% the second year, and then evenly split after that?
That's 50%.
No, that doesn't get us much. I think we need 3 years. And then you can split it 50/50 for thing, consumption and stuff. I just, I don't know, I just know we need the money.
That's not in dispute.
I mean, if it's so, you know, if we have all these needs, we gotta find the money. We keep deferring it by doing that. And we put it out there, you know, if, I don't know, I just,
Let me ask you, if, I'm gonna, if we go that route, then I'm gonna request that, place on our work agenda, looking for a low-income program.
Yeah.
That option.
Oh,
for
I
people
support
that are gonna
that.
get hit very hard, that could get hit very hard with this.
yeah,
We need to do that right away.
And we need to do
yeah,
that.
I don't have trouble with that at all.
If we go that route, we need to do something that addresses that issue.
Sure,
And
I think that's
I
responsible.
tried to address it this way, so we have to address it this other way.
That's fine with me, I don't have any trouble providing some framework to give those people relief.
All right, I'll accept it then.
You like that?
I'll go with it. I didn't say I liked it, I said,
Okay.
there's a difference.
Well,
We
you know, I,
understand the motion now.
What,
The
okay.
motion is 5 years, 9.5% a year.
No, option C, which is 3 years, 9.5%. Those 3 years will all go on the base rate. And then, and it's,
and the last 5 will be split.
and the last 5 will be just across the tiers as normal. And it's a full 8 years, a full 8-year program.
What,
And then we'll-
what the last 5 years?
They're at, is it 6, I think it is?
5.75 for 3 years, 5.5, and then 3% on the 8th year.
On the 8th year. So it drops, after the first 3 years, it drops into the 5% range. And then the last year, it's 3%.
Equally split between the base rate and the consumption.
Yeah. And it's a full 8-year program, which puts us in a position to address the bonding issue.
Ken has made a motion, and wants in the public to wish to testify. Seeing none, any more discussion from the board? We will have a roll call vote. All those in favor say aye, those opposed say no.
Commissioner Humberstone?
Aye.
Commissioner Kalani?
Aye.
Commissioner McNeil?
Aye.
Commissioner Silver?
No,
Motion carries 3-1.
I think we've completed our agenda. With that, we'll adjourn.